Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Libya's leader threatens to use force against Eastern Federalists. Palestinian hunger strikers reignite prisoners' rights movement. And Saudi security forces beat female students protesting inequality. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
The head of Libya's National Transitional Council, Mustafa Abdulhadi, threatened to use force to prevent Libya from being divided. This comes one day after the eastern area of Cyrenaica was declared a federal region. He considered the declaration to be the beginning of a conspiracy against Libya, accusing Arab countries of stirring strife in Libya. Libyan tribal leaders and politicians in Benghazi declared Ahmed al-Zubair al-Sanusi the head of the regional council.
Cyrenaica's formation of a federal state in eastern Libya shocked the Libyan street. Nearly 3,000 tribal leaders and politicians from eastern Libya gathered in Benghazi, putting the country on the road to partition. The conference announced that Ahmed al-Sanusi, a former political prisoner and member of the family that ruled Libya before Gaddafi, will lead the region. In addition, it decided to adopt the independence constitution of the 1950s, which divides Libya into 3 autonomous states of Tripolitania, Cyrenaica, and Fezzan. However, the danger of this declaration lies in indications that conference attendees reject the constitutional proclamation, the distribution of the seats in the Constituency Assembly, the electoral law, and all laws and resolutions that conflict with their authority. This means effectively rejecting the entire political process, despite the conventioneers' reaffirmation that they stand for national unity and the recognition of the National Transitional Council.
We are using the federal system to try and prevent Libya from being divided.
The head of the National Transitional Council, Mustafa Abdul-Jalil, pointed to a conspiracy by unnamed Arab countries, accusing them of what he referred to as fomenting, funding, and sponsoring chaos in eastern Libya out of fear that the waves of revolution may reach them. He considered what is happening to be the beginning of a conspiracy against the country and a threat to its national unity.
What's happened in parts of the city of Benghazi today, the declaration of the so-called Cyrenaica Council, is extremely dangerous and threatens national unity, for which honourable Libyans fought. We are surprised by these voices calling for dividing Libya.
The popular reaction was just as strong.
No to tribalism, no to dividing Libya. Libya is one. Its capital is Tripoli.
Libya is one. It cannot be divided.
Thousands of people participated in demonstrations considering the declaration a betrayal of the martyrs' blood and the revolution's ideas, marking the country's official entry into a new era called the danger of division.
Participants in the Solidarity sit-in organised in front of the Red Cross in Tulkarm called for supporting the prisoners in the occupation's prisons, in particular prisoner and hunger striker Kifa al-Hattab and female prisoner Hannah al-Shalabi.
On the eve of March 8th, a large protest was organised in support of hunger strikers Hannah al-Shalabi and Kifa al-Hattab. In attendance were representatives of the General Union of Palestinian Women, commissions, institutions, organizational bodies, and the families of the prisoners of the district of Tulkarm. The families expressed anger at the occupation's prison administration for stalling the prisoners' demand for a response and delaying their release.
Palestinian women have always insisted on standing side by side with the men in all fronts and struggles. A shining star of our people, Sister Hannah al-Shalabi, continues her strike and is now on her 20th consecutive day of hunger strike. Kifa is also still on strike. Through this act, she is raising her voice, demanding to shed light on the issue of prisoners who are harassed on a daily basis.
This is the 9th consecutive day that prisoner Kifa al-Hattab has been on a hunger strike to demand his legitimate and human rights as a prisoner of war in accordance with the 3rd and 4th Geneva Conventions. He has refused to stand for the daily count and wear the occupation's prisoner uniform.
He insists he is a prisoner of war. At the end of the day, they are all prisoners of war. God willing, more actions will be taken. We care about the issue of all prisoners in general. But in reality, we don't know what awaits him, and we're very scared for him.
Families of the prisoners and those liberated from imprisonment called for wide-scale participation in solidarity events with the prisoners' movements in the occupation's prisons, and especially during this upcoming phase, as the prisoners are getting ready to wage a series of struggles to put an end to their suffering.
The popular movement and the prisoners' movement need broader participation, and the prisoners' movement deserves much more action. We hope all communities of our Palestinian people will take part in this movement.
We need broader mobilization expanding to the international level, involving organizations and UN commissions, because the situation of the prisoners behind bars is deteriorating.
Organizations concerned with the prisoners' issues testified to the extent of Israel's suppression of the prisoners' movement, commending the prisoners' resistance, and reaffirmed the inevitability of their victory over prisons and wardens.
The open-ended, epic hunger strike that prisoner Khader Adnan waged displayed the status of the prisoners' movement and gained momentum, and this struggle continues. On that basis, we demand the Palestinian leadership sets the issue of prisoners as their priority and calls for more popular and public support in solidarity with the prisoners' honorable battle.
Reports coming out of the occupation's prisons confirm that a prisoners' battle is scheduled for April. They aim to protest the occupation's repression and the Israeli prison administration's rejection of the prisoners' demands, and in opposition to the policy of administrative detention. This battle may escalate into a declaration of civil disobedience and a rejection of the warden's orders, reaching an open-ended hunger strike. Despite the escalating Israeli crackdown on the prisoners' rights movements in the occupation's prisons, a number of detainees continue to wage hunger strikes to protest these policies. Wide-scale popular and official campaigns continue in solidarity with the prisoners' movement in the occupation's prisons. Win Shadid, Palestine TV, from in front of the Red Cross, Tulkarm.
International Women's Day in the occupied Palestinian territories is placing the spotlight this year on Palestinian female prisoners amid the deteriorating health of prisoner Hana al-Shalabi, who has entered her 21st day of hunger strike at the Israeli Hasharon prison. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Minister of Prisoners' Affairs, Issa Karakeh, warned of the deteriorating situation inside Israeli prisons. He added that the prisoners threatened to burn down the prisons because they have nothing to lose in the face of Israeli brutality.
The Jordanian government is looking for alternative sources to Egyptian gas supplies, which were again halted following the recent bombing of the pipeline that supplies Jordan with gas. The bombing is the 13th such attack this year. Jordan is making contact with the Egyptian side to assess the extent of the damage and anticipated date for the resumption of gas supplies, which the kingdom depends on to generate 80% of its electricity needs. Sawal al-Sawalka reports from Amman.
This Egyptian pipeline stopped supplying gas to Jordan following a series of bombings targeting its infrastructure inside Egyptian territories, casting a heavy shadow on the Jordanian economy. More than 80% of the kingdom's electricity needs are produced by facilities that operate on Egyptian gas. For this reason, its disruption means that these facilities must run on heavy fuel, which is very expensive. In order to offset the rising production cost, the government imposed an increase on the electric bill, which was widely rejected by the people because it adds an economic burden on them.
My last electricity bill was 185 Jordan dinars. This is unreasonable. Where can we get the money to pay it? The market is not moving and the economy is bad. Everything is going up.
During a parliamentary hearing to discuss the recent spike in the cost of electricity, the Jordanian government said that more than 90% of the citizens weren't affected by the increase, which it says will be reviewed after resolving the problem of gas supplies.
During its previous session, the government made it clear that the recent price hike will not affect 92% of Jordanian households. The rate increase is proportional to the average household's consumption across all of the kingdom's provinces.
Last year, the Jordanian electricity company incurred more than $1.5 billion in losses due to the bombings of the Egyptian gas pipeline. This prompted the government to seek other gas alternatives that will not affect its overall overall budget and cost less for the citizens.
Jordan has some local sources which it can focus on in the coming period. However, it will take time before we start seeing results.
The halt of Egyptian gas supplies is a problem affecting the Jordanian economy, adding an additional burden on the government, especially at the public level. The rise in the prices of goods and services was cause for tension and protests. Salma Sawalka, Dubai TV, Amman.
The protests against injustice and inequality are spreading across Saudi Arabia. This time, female students of King Khalid University in the southwestern city of Abha have gathered to protest what they call discrimination and the mistreatment by security officials at the university. They also denounced lack of facilities, some of them very basic, like chairs. Reports say security forces have attacked and beaten some of the protesters. Also, activists say that Saudi human rights campaigner Muhammad al-Abdulhadi has refused to eat for the 16th day to protest his detention of nearly a year without trial. Saudi Arabia is facing growing outcries demanding justice and the release of political prisoners. Protesters continue to hold rallies in the eastern province despite a tough security response. Human rights campaigners warn that the health of jailed Bahraini activist Abdulhadi al-Khawaja is deteriorating as he has refused to eat for 27 days now. Al-Khawaja is on a hunger strike to protest deteriorating prison conditions. Activists and human rights organizations, along with anti-regime protesters, have repeatedly called on Manama to free al-Khawaja, currently serving a life sentence. They've also launched many campaigns to highlight his ordeal. In the latest attempt, protesters set up roadblocks across the kingdom to express solidarity with al-Khawaja. Also, activists have announced plans for a big rally on March the 9th to revitalize their protests against the al-Khalifa regime. Bahrain's revolution started in February of last year. Since then, dozens of people have been killed and hundreds arrested. 6 British troops serving with U.S.-led forces in Afghanistan have been killed in an explosion. The soldiers were on patrol when their vehicle was struck by a roadside bomb in the southern province of Helmand. The incident marks the biggest loss of life for British troops in a single attack over the past few years. So far, at least 404 British service members have been killed in Afghanistan's decade-long conflict. The Afghan army has blamed the Taliban for the attack.
As you see, Taliban placed a mine here. When the convoy of the British passed the road, the mine went off. We spent the whole night here to assist the British soldiers in evacuating their wounded soldiers and the destroyed car.
The British Prime Minister has also expressed sorrow over the incident.
Please give us your reaction to the events in Afghanistan.
Well, this is a desperately sad day for our country and desperately sad, of course, for the families concerned. It is a reminder of the huge price that we're paying for the work we're doing in Afghanistan, the sacrifice that our troops have made and continue to make.
At least 16 people have been killed in a series of bomb explosions in Iraq. A car bomb went off in a commercial area in Baghdad's western Mansour district, killing 3 people. Police say the attack was targeted at the Minister of Housing as his convoy was driving in the area at the time of the explosion. The minister escaped unharmed. 2 other car bombings north of Baghdad have killed at least 13 people. Officials say the attacks in Tal Afar district was aimed at civilians. Violence in Iraq has dropped considerably since its high a few years ago, but deadly attacks still happen almost every day. They often target government buildings and Iraqi security forces.
أعلنت لجان التنسيق المحلية في سوريا سقوط 40 قتيلا برصاص كتائب الأسد.
Local coordination committees in Syria announced the death of 40 people by the gunfire of al-Assad's brigades, most of them in Idlib. Demonstrations against the Assad regime were held last night in a number of the Syrian capital's regions. Most notable was the protest in Al-Abbasin Square, the second most important public square in central Damascus. At the same time, the United Nations humanitarian chief held talks in the Syrian capital before visiting Homs, while the International Committee of the Red Cross said a Syrian Red Crescent team entered the neighbourhood of Baba Amr today and revealed that most residents had left.
The Assad killing regime was not content by merely cracking down on peaceful protests, murdering and displacing people, but it is spreading a culture of destruction to every area it enters. In the latest development of the Assad Brigade's oppressive mobilization, dozens of tanks, troop carriers, and military forces were moved from Latakia to the city of Sarakib in Idlib, which will soon be subjected to all forms of violence. And despite the destruction carried out by the Syrian security forces in the Shabiha during their arrest campaigns and raids of residential areas, they also steal from stores and homes. They destroy personal properties and cars as revenge operations against those demanding freedom. According to testimonies by local residents, al-Assad's Shabiha stormed the neighborhood of al-Kabun in Damascus and arrested a number of activists. They also set up checkpoints and searched passers-by. Local coordination committees said al-Assad's forces detained 30 hostages in Ain Laruz in the Jabal al-Zawiya area, threatening to execute them unless 3 defectors returned to the forces. And in Aleppo, al-Assad's brigades launched a campaign of home raids and arrests, as heavy gunfire was reported and heard from the area of Thurn al-Taqwa. This, as the International Committee of the Red Cross said, a Syrian Arab Red Crescent team entered the neighborhood of Baba Amer. The team said the neighborhood is destroyed and most of its residents have indeed left to other regions. On the other hand, the Syrian Revolution's General Commission reported that al-Assad's brigades committed a new massacre in Homs. 7 young men from the same family were killed in the area of Basatin Baba Amer. Meanwhile, United Nations humanitarian chief Valerie Amos met with Foreign Minister Walid al-Mualim, then headed to Homs. Al-Mualim confirmed that Syria is committed to cooperating with the UN humanitarian agency, provided it respects Syrian sovereignty and independence. As for Amos, she stressed the need to respect Syria's sovereignty and reject using the humanitarian aspect for political gains. Demonstrations were held in a number of Syrian cities and towns, most prominent of which was a night protest that reached, for the first time, Abbasayin Square in central Damascus. The square witnessed an unprecedented security deployment after the protest. At the same time, defections from the Syrian army continue. Brigadier General Adnan Qassem Farsat announced his defection from the army, confirming he has joined opposition forces in rejection of the shelling of his town of al-Rastan.
I announced my defection from the Syrian military and that I am joining the Free Syrian Arab Army. I informed some commanders that Rastan is being hit by artillery fire, and in spite of this, the bombardment continued violently. Houses have been destroyed and women and children have been killed. These are not the values of the Syrian army, and for this reason, I am defecting.
In Idlib, residents held funerals for yesterday's victims, killed by the gunfire of al-Assad's brigades. Mourners chanted that the revolution will continue until the departure of the Assad regime.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has wrapped up his 3-day trip to Washington and has just landed back in Israel. Before leaving the U.S., Netanyahu followed up on his summit with President Obama by holding talks with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Netanyahu's top security aide gave a strong indication of the Israeli position coming out of the summit. National Security Council head Major General Yaakov Amidror told Israel Radio that Jerusalem must be ready to act against Iran should talks between the international community and Tehran fail. Amidror also said that without a military option, Iran will not take the talks seriously, and he added that Israel cannot wait until it has lost the ability to act effectively to defend itself. Amidror added that Israel will not be dependent on a decision by President Obama. Netanyahu's final stop was on Capitol Hill, where he thanked the lawmakers for maintaining a robust policy to keep Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons.
We've had a very good visit in Washington. First in my discussions with the President in the Oval Office, then in meetings with our delegations, then in the opportunity I had to address AIPAC last night, and now culminating in this remarkable display of solidarity here in the Congress of the United States. It's bipartisan. It cuts across the Senate into the House. There have been wonderful expressions of support that you've just heard from Mr. Boehner and Mrs. Pelosi. And I think it reflects the general sentiment that we see here today. I think that as we face the challenges that confront our world, the world of the United States, Israel, the free nations, and in fact all nations in the world today, those great challenges require really three qualities to address them successfully. The three are clarity, courage, and wisdom. I don't think that there is a place anywhere else on earth where we can match the clarity, courage, and wisdom that I find here in the halls of this institution and amidst these venerable friends. I want to thank you for your friendship. I want to thank you for your support. I go back to Israel feeling that we have great friends in Washington.
In his first public comment since his summit with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Barack Obama stood by his declaration that Iran will not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. However, Obama appears to be at odds with the Prime Minister over just how immediate the Iranian threat is.
We will not countenance Iran getting a nuclear weapon. My policy is not containment. My policy is to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon, because if they get a nuclear weapon, that could trigger an arms race in the region. It would undermine our non-proliferation goals. It could potentially fall into the hands of terrorists. And we've been in close consultation with all our allies, including Israel, in moving this strategy forward. At this stage, it is my belief that we have a window of opportunity where this can still be resolved diplomatically. Israel is a sovereign nation that has to make its own decisions about how best to preserve its security. Because the sanctions are going to be even tougher in the coming months, because they're now starting to affect their oil industry, their central bank, and because we're now seeing noises about them returning to the negotiating table, that it is deeply in everybody's interests, the United States, Israel, and the world's, to see if this can be resolved in a peaceful fashion.
Jordanian Foreign Minister Nasser Judah met with a number of Palestinian Authority officials. The Jordanian Foreign Minister conveyed a message to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas from the Jordanian King, confirming Jordan's support of the Palestinian positions and the importance of negotiations to achieve the sought-after regional peace. Our correspondent Iman Erekat reports from Ramallah.
Looking for opportunities to revive the peace process, Jordanian Foreign Minister Nasser Judah returned to Ramallah to meet with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas following his visits to Brussels, Washington and Moscow. Judah came with a message from Jordanian King Abdullah II, confirming his country's full support of the Palestinian leadership. He stressed the importance of peaceful negotiations to resolve all outstanding issues between the Palestinians and Israelis, including final status issues.
We looked into the opportunities to revive the peace talks, and we're still searching. And we will make contact with all parties, both inside and outside the region, as well as influential countries, and with decision makers to secure suitable conditions to resume the negotiations, God willing.
In the meetings between the Jordanians and Palestinians, discussions were held on the latest political developments, especially after Israeli-Palestinian meetings in Amman went nowhere, as described by Palestinians. The Palestinian side also affirmed that President Abbas is working on a draft letter specifying the Palestinian stance on a number of issues. The letter will be addressed to the Israeli Prime Minister and the international community and communicated through a Palestinian delegation.
The President is still working working on finishing this letter. So, as soon as he is done, the Palestinians will send it, and we can discuss its content at that point.
This is the Jordanian foreign minister's second such visit since the end of last year. Some people on the Palestinian street consider it to be an attempt to push forward bilateral meetings between Palestinians and Israelis.
قد نشهد صيغ أخرى ربما تعيدنا إلى فكرة المفاوضات التقريبية التي كانت.
We may see other formats that could revive the idea of rapprochement negotiations held during the last phase of the Olmert government, meaning the Jordanian side will bring forward proposals to the Palestinians and Israelis, but without convening direct meetings.
دون أن نشهد لقاءات مباشرة.
The Jordanian-Palestinian meetings concluded by confirming additional meetings will be held in the near future. Talks by the political leadership on the importance of quickly moving forward the peace process and the possibility of resuming Palestinian-Israeli bilateral meetings have been met by confirmations from various Palestinian communities that resuming the meetings is useless since they have long been a failure, adding that a Palestinian strategy must be agreed upon first before reaching decisions. From the Palestinian presidential headquarters in Ramallah, Iman Erikat, BBC.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.